All right, hi guys. All right, if you don't mind, I'd like to start out and excuse my voice. I've been fighting the worst cruddy cold that I've had in decades, so excuse my voice. But I'd like to start off by asking you two important questions, if I may, okay? Show of hands. Number one, how many of you believe that leaders are born? In other words, you either have it or you don't, okay? Or number two, how many of you believe that leadership can be learned? All right, I'd like to start off by telling you a story. Once upon a time, back in the olden days, the prehistoric days of Pampered Chef, there was a director that I know who had just promoted to that level. She decided that it would be more efficient to train the 8 new consultants she had recruited that month and the 7 new consultants she had recruited the month before together in one meeting rather than one by one. Although she was nervous, she announced the meeting. She invited everyone to her house because there was no Zoom, and everyone lived nearby because there were only cooking shows. She had a good turnout, and she felt she had helped people. She felt it went so well, in fact, that she was happy to see that one of her new recruits, a woman who had attended the first meeting and brought her daughter, whom she had just recruited, to the second meeting. After that meeting was over, that older woman came up to the new director and whispered in her ear, "Thank you very much, dear, but I won't be coming back again. You were all over the place. You forgot to cover this, and you forgot to cover that, and bless your heart, dear, maybe you want to think about a written agenda." I was devastated. Yep, that new director was me. And if you're sitting there thinking, okay, Carol Rideau did a meeting without a written agenda, it's because you only know the Carol Rideau who has been a national executive director and has been conducting meetings for 32 years. The thought of putting together an agenda so that my people would have consistent training from one month to the next had never occurred to me. So, I vote for number 2. Thank God leadership can be learned, or I unequivocally would not be here 32 years later. And what I've learned over the years is that it not only matters who I am as a leader, it also matters what I do as a leader. And it certainly would have been helpful if I had the tools available that are available to us now, like the 6 leadership principles. Do I have somebody doing slides for me?
I will do them for you, Carol.
I guess we know. Oh, is this the clicker?
Yes.
Okay. Nope. We didn't rehearse this.
You can learn that.
All right. The 6 leadership principles. Number 1, take action today. Number 2, lead by example. Number 3, own your story. Number 4, grow and learn continuously. Number 5, embrace the potential in yourself and others. Number 6, live with purpose. Nor did I have the guidance of a director above me. In fact, after I promoted to advanced director, my director asked me to stop attending her meetings because she said that my success was intimidating to her team. True story. Now, I tell you this only because I want you to understand. In fact, I want you to truly believe that leadership can be learned. And as I look back on my career with Pampered Chef, I have really come to realize that helping my people learn to do this business well and promote to director is helping them to be good at their job. But helping them become a leader is helping them to be good at life. A good coach, slide. A good coach can change a game. A great coach can change a life, said the legendary college basketball coach John Wooden. Think about that. You have the power to change lives. And I don't mean that lightly. I mean that very sincerely. You have the power to change lives. And that is legacy to be proud of. Now, in order to truly believe that leadership can be learned, you truly need to believe that people can learn and change. You need to believe in a growth mindset. If this concept is new to you, it's the research of Dr. Carol Dweck, professor of psychology at Stanford University. And it's outlined in her book, Mindset, The New Psychology of Success. Simply stated, her research found that by adding one 3-letter word to her students' vocabularies and her teacher vocabularies, the word yet allowed students the freedom to own what they did not know and have hope that they could learn it and become better for it. And her research showed it allowed teachers the hope that their work was not in vain. How many of you feel like you're pulling your hair out? Their work was not in vain. So what does it take besides a growth mindset to develop leaders rather than just directors on your team? Here are my thoughts, 6 thoughts for you. Number 1, feed a man a fish and you feed him for a day. Teach a man to fish and you feed him for a lifetime. This corresponds to leadership principle number 1, take action today. If I could sum up my beliefs and what I strive for as a leader into just 2 sentences, these are the 2 sentences I would choose. Now, whether you had a great role model as a director or not, leadership, I believe, can be learned. And that means that you need to have a teacher. Through the years, I've often had directors in my organization call out their upline director to me for their lack of performance. Is it a requirement as a teacher to have a great director above you? Now, while it's never okay to collect a paycheck for a job that you're not doing, It is not necessary to have a stellar director above you to become a good director. I know, because in the first few years of my business, when I did have an upline director, I did not hear from her one single time, not a card, not a phone call, not a visit. She lived 3 miles away. Not a gift, nothing in 3 years. Even though during those 3 years, I promoted to the highest level of the career plan, at the time, Senior Executive Director. I earned 4 Circle of Honor awards. I never heard a single word from her. She then left the business, and I became a home office direct. So in the beginning, I was frustrated with this. But I will tell you now that I am truly, truly thankful for this. Why? Because it forced me to make every mistake in the book. Every single one. You'll hear later. And hopefully to learn from those mistakes. Now, my lessons were not learned at the feet of a great teacher, but rather in the school of hard knocks. A valid teacher nonetheless. And if I may, I would like to call out a practice for a moment that I have noticed over the past few years of using the terms director and leader as synonyms. To me, it is extremely important to understand that not every director is a leader. Let me repeat that. Not every director is a leader. In fact, it's so important that we remember that we promote directors and we develop leaders. I always tell my new directors that my goal is for them to not need me someday. That's when I know I will have done my job well. I'm going to take it a step further. Automatically calling and treating all directors as leaders takes us off the hook for teaching them how to develop as leaders. I think it also puts too much pressure on new directors, especially when they don't feel like leaders. I always tell my new directors, quote, "You and I are going to be spending a lot of time together. Just like when you were brand new and a brand new consultant and you didn't know anything, I want you to understand that there will inevitably be a learning curve associated with your new title. I don't expect you to know everything right away. Be patient with yourself in your new role, and you will learn to become not only a director, but a good leader." Number 2, be authentic and make sure to operate on principle. Doris Christopher said that, and I associate that with leadership principle number 3, own your story. Excuse me. Last month, I decided to call Doris and I talked to her about leadership because Doris is the best example of a leader that I personally know. When I promoted to Senior Executive Director, the highest title in the company at the time, there were only 2 other Senior Executive Directors, and it was just the 3 of us for a few years. So I feel truly blessed to have worked with Doris at that level in such a small group setting and see a leader in action. Doris talked to me about being authentic as a leader. And that is certainly one of those catchphrases we hear so much about today. But the idea has in fact been around forever. What does it really mean? To me, it means that my people should never have to guess what my reaction or decision will be. Based on my values and principles with which they are well acquainted, they know how I will respond before I respond, because they know who I am. That is what I mean when I say it matters who I am as a leader. What it does not mean to me is that everyone has to know everything about me and my life. It simply means that my people know who I am as a leader, and that will inform what I do as a leader. Doris also shared that while she did not always know what to do about a particular problem at the time, she always relied on her values and principles to be her guide in making her decision. And that is why I did not always like the decisions she made, but I always respected why they were made. Number 3, trust is the glue of life. It is the most essential ingredient in effective communication. It is the foundational principle that holds all relationships, said by Dr. Stephen Covey, and I associate that with leadership principle number 2, lead by example. And talking about being guided by principles leads us naturally to trust. As leaders, we want our people to respect us, but to me, it is impossible to respect someone I do not trust. Please hear me on this. If you take only one thing away from my talk today, please let it be this. Trust is the most important element necessary to building those relationships we all hear is so vital to being a part of a relationship business. What does trust look like in a relationship with your directors? To me, trust means dependability, compassion for them, and for them to believe beyond a shadow of a doubt that I have their best interest at heart. It means that they can rely on my dependability. Stephen Covey defines trust this way. Trust is confidence born of 2 dimensions, character and competence. Character includes your integrity, motive, and intent with people. Competence includes your capabilities, skills, results, track record, etc. Both dimensions are vital. You know, we talk often about, and we know, that we should lead by example. And what we mean by that typically is what we do as leaders. But to me, leading by example is not just about what I do, but that they know who I am as a leader. In other words, the character part of trust. But they really start to trust us when we work on getting better at leadership and we help them be better at leadership in the process. Again, I want my people to know who I am as a leader and that will also inform what I do as a leader. And how do you build that trust? By being consistent and predictable, for starters. Here are some ideas for you. Number one, trust starts to develop when we are always present. Now, before you get really nervous, that does not mean that we are always available. It does mean that we don't ever disappear for weeks or months at a time. I tell my directors this all the time. If they would just stop popping in and out, in and out, in and out, in and out of their businesses, they wouldn't need to wonder why their people don't want to talk to them. More to come on this later. Number two, trust starts to develop when our people know that we mean what we say. Number three, trust starts to develop when we are consistent in how we deal with our team and team members. So if you would, allow me please to give you an example of what I mean by this in the form of a quick little story. The very first Pampered Chef conference of any kind that I attended was a leadership conference, which I attended alone because I didn't have any directors yet. By the time national conference rolled around, I had 2 directors, both of whom I had worked very closely with and become very friendly with. When it came time to make arrangements to attend national conference, I asked my 2 directors if they wanted to share a room with me. We had the best time. We got along beautifully, we laughed, we learned together. The arrangement worked so well that the following year, I asked those 2 directors if they wanted to room together again, and they said yes. Now, by this time, I had more than 2 directors. During that conference, it got back to me that one of my directors, who had a far more independent, she was a far more independent director with a kind of standoffish personality, was going around telling everyone that the way you get close to Carol is you sleep with her. This is a true story, guys. Now, of course, she meant this as a joke, but the statement behind it was most definitely not a joke. Even though, because of her personality, I had no idea she would be jealous, she clearly was. And from that point on, I never had another roommate at conference. And I never have asked anyone to sit at a reserved table or in reserved seating or anything special without some justification. In other words, they were the top sellers or the top recruiters, something, or the top promoters, something achievable, that there was a reason that they were chosen that would send a clear message to everyone else on the team, be a top seller or recruiter or promoter, and you too could be in this seat. I want my people to know that I am consistent in how I deal with everyone on the team and that I don't play favorites. And number 4, we build trust when we always remember, and you've heard this all day, that people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. My goal in every coaching call that I do is to ask more questions than statements. Making statements is usually when I'm spewing out knowledge. While there's a time and place for that, it doesn't help create a two-way conversation. If you think this isn't all that important, listen to this. The Harvard School of Business now teaches a class called Talk. But the professor who teaches it says, her name is Dr. Allison Wood Brooks, she said, the great irony is that it really should be called Listen. It is a class designed to help business people have better conversations with their people centered around listening rather than talking. Only when my people are talking do I learn where their head is and what's on their heart. And if you still think this doesn't matter, that you talk to your people, you have only to look at the recent Southwest Airlines debacle over the holidays to understand this. Now, I'm sure that many of you saw the amazing article that was going around on Facebook written by one of the Southwest pilots and posted the day after the nightmare for Southwest started. But just in case you missed it, I have a very short little excerpt in his own words. So this is, I'm quoting the pilot here. I've been a pilot for Southwest Airlines for over 35 years. I've given my heart and my soul to Southwest Airlines during those years, and quite honestly, I feel Southwest Airlines has given its heart and soul to me and my family. Many of you have asked what caused this epic meltdown. Unfortunately, the frontline employees have been watching this meltdown coming like a slow motion train wreck for some time. And we've been begging our leadership to make much needed changes in order to avoid it. What happened yesterday started 2 decades ago. Herb Kelleher, the brilliant CEO of Southwest Airlines until 2004, was a very operationally oriented leader. Herb spent lots of time on the front line. He always had his pulse on the day-to-day operation and the people who ran it. That philosophy flowed down through the ranks of leadership into the frontline managers. We were a tight operation from top to bottom. We had tools, leadership, and employee buy-in. Everything that was needed to run a first-class operation. When Herb retired in 2004, Gary Kelly became the new CEO. Gary was an accountant by education, and his style leading Southwest Airlines became more focused on finances and less on operations and people. He did not spend much time on the front lines. He didn't engage frontline employees much. When the CEO doesn't get operations, when the CEO doesn't get out in the trenches, neither do the lower levels of leadership. As time went on, the operation began to deteriorate. There was little investment in upgrading technology or the tools we needed to operate efficiently and consistently. As the frontline employees began to see the deterioration in our operation, we began to warn our leadership. We educated them, we informed them, we made suggestions to them, but to no avail. They weren't talking or listening to their people. Now, what can we learn from this? We are, after all the CEOs of our own organizations, aren't we? So what's your style of leadership? Are you Herb Kelleher or are you Gary Kelly? Talking to the front line is critical to our understanding of what's going on in our business, and it helps our people know we have their back. It helps them trust us, and it is trust that enables us to take relationships to another level. Trust is what also enables us to have those difficult conversations that almost all directors avoid. Now, while I know no one who actually enjoys having difficult conversations, avoiding them often leads to disaster. Saying nothing at all because we're afraid we'll say the wrong thing and lose a team member means that we will guarantee the loss of that team member. Think of it this way. Saying nothing at all is interpreted either as not caring enough to offer help, or even worse, not noticing that there is a problem, meaning that this person is invisible to us, not important enough for us to even notice them. So, how do we get to the point where we can have those conversations and have them well received? We open an emotional bank account for each of our directors. So what's an emotional bank account? It is a metaphor developed by Dr. Stephen Covey that describes the amount of trust that has been built up in a relationship. The more you deposit, the bigger the balance. The bigger the balance, the more you can take a withdrawal in the form of a difficult conversation and still have a relationship that's in the black. Now, of course, this means caring enough to help support them emotionally without getting caught up in their drama. Okay? Are you all listening? Without getting caught up in the drama. So, this is what I have found works like a charm. This is what I say after I listen to all the drama. I say, quote, "I'm so sorry you're having to go through fill in the blank, that nasty divorce, or taking care of your sick mother, or whatever. While I'm definitely not qualified to help you with that, what I can do is to help keep your business on track while you're going through that." One of the very best ways I have found to get my point across without having to call them out on their lack of performance or their bad behavior is to tell a story. Research shows that telling stories actually helps us to understand and relate to challenges better. And it helps our team members to participate in creating their own solution to a problem. The best example of a storyteller getting a difficult point across, Jesus. Jesus says in Matthew 13:13, "This is why I speak to them in parables. Though seeing, they do not see. Though hearing, they do not hear or understand." Seems like Jesus knows some of my directors. Telling stories allows people to actually identify with a problem and to own both the problem and then the solution themselves. And I try to use myself as the example of that problem as much as possible. In fact, I tried to model that concept for you in my talk today, for those of you who were paying attention. This also helps overcome the challenge we all have with directors not believing that we as executive directors encounter problems at all. And I also believe that it's important to be thoughtful about what we share and pass on. You know, there is no shortage of ideas floating around out there. But my directors know that when I pass something on to them, it's something I have either tried myself and I know it works, or it's something that fits in with my values and principles. You see, I don't think my directors need as much help getting new ideas as much as they need help finding workable solutions to their problems. And it also means that I have a policy, that if I have a policy question that will affect someone's business, I don't source Facebook as an answer. I gotta tell you guys, this really bothers me. It really bothers me. I'm holding back saying what I really want to say. How lazy can you be? I mean, come on. We have a consultant policy guide. If someone's directorship or incentive trip depends on the answer, Go to the guy, this is what I do. I copy and paste it and send it to them. Period, end of story. No calling the solution center and talking to someone who doesn't know what you're talking about. Go, oh. All right. All right, I'm over it. Okay.
Yeah, are you really over it?
Number four.
I'm trying. We'll move.
Number four. No, that was number 4 within number 3. This is the big number 4. All right, so I'll just tell them, okay?
I'm confused.
I'll just a little arrow on the right.
I can try. You want me to come up there?
Don't listen, guys. Let's just do it, okay?
Let's just do it, Carol.
To lead, here's the quote, and I love this quote.
Keep talking.
To lead people, walk behind them. That was said by Lao Tzu, and it corresponds to me to leadership principle number 5, embrace the potential in yourself and others. To me, the best synonym for the word leader is servant. It is when we start behaving as though we work for our people rather than they work for us that the magic begins. But please do not confuse serving your people with doing everything for your people. In fact, to me, it means just the opposite. It means taking the time to teach them how and let them learn to do for themselves. This goes back to my first point. When you hand a man a fish, you feed him for a day. When you teach a man to fish, you feed him for a lifetime. I want to be in the business of feeding for a lifetime. On a practical level, this means remembering also that our attitude helps determine our outcome. So rather than thinking, I have to, ... I try to remember to rephrase that to, I get to, ... And remembering that I lead an all-volunteer army means that I cannot disappear when I'm going through my own challenges, and yes, guys, I have them too. To me, that means that I have never taken a grace month in 32 years. Despite selling 3 houses, building 4 houses, moving 5 times, 6 graduations, 1 wedding and another coming up next year, a hospitalized child, dealing with my own, with both of my parents' illnesses and eventually losing both of my parents, my own cancer diagnosis and cancer surgery and radiation, and then a few months ago, being hospitalized in intensive care for a week with a stroke. It also means canceled parties, losing directors, lower than expected sales, products out of stock, my own very sorry lack of tech knowledge, and on and on and on. My mental health breaks last for a day, not for a month, or two. Otherwise, I know I will lose the trust of my people. And guys, make no mistake about this. Broken trust is hard and time-consuming to rebuild. Number 5. This is my favorite quote of all. Stay in your seat come times of trouble. It is only people who jump off the roller coaster who get hurt. The very wise Paul Harvey said that. Leadership principle number 6, live with purpose. Whether you like roller coasters or not, personally, I do not. This business has its share of ups and downs. Do your best not to get caught up in the drama. I know that some of us thrive on drama, but in the long run, it's exhausting and counterproductive. So every time we sell out of a product, I totally get that it's an annoyance, but it is not the end of the world or even the end of our business. In the 32 years that I've been with the business, I have seen a lot. And if I may, for the next little minute, at the risk of sounding like your grandmother, I'd like to share some of those things with you in an attempt to give you some perspective. Early on in my business, all of our stoneware was manufactured in a single factory. One year, that factory had a fire. Right before the start of the holiday selling season. So, all of our stoneware was on stop sell for the entire holiday season. Now, these were the days before we had any electric products. The only other higher priced products we had to help us get bookings were cookware and knives. But stoneware was definitely our signature product line and what we were known for. And we had none of it for an entire holiday selling season. And of course, there was September 11th. For those of you who were still very young at this time, let me tell you, the whole country came to a stop. Literally. Remembering that we only had cooking shows in those days, the last thing we wanted to do was call people and ask them if they wanted to throw a party. And speaking of only having cooking shows, when I started, there were no computers in homes. Imagine that. We balanced parties manually and mailed the party paperwork with payment to the home office. And when it didn't balance, which it almost never did, on the first or 41st try, we redid it until it did. And even when we mailed it to the home office to arrive by the last day of the month, sometimes it didn't arrive because the post office decided to send it on the scenic route. And we missed promotions and bonuses and incentives and trips. And no one had a cell phone. And the internet wasn't a thing yet. So, when we went out to do a party, we called our host on a telephone and asked them to give us directions to their house. And then we looked at a map, a paper map. And when we got lost, which, by the way, happened to me all the time because I was brand new to the Dallas Metroplex when I started my business, as my husband had just gotten transferred there. So when we got lost, we had to stop and ask directions at a gas station and hope we found someone who spoke English and try to find a payphone to call our host to tell her we would be late. And we had no real-time sales report. In fact, we didn't even have Consultant Connection to give us updated numbers once a day. Unless we talked to our teams and hoped they gave us honest answers, we never knew what our team members had sold or recruited until halfway through the following month, when we received a paper report in the mail, the snail mail, once per month. And yes, there were a lot of changes in leadership at the home office and even changes in ownership of the business. When we were sold to Warren Buffett, most of us think of that as a great thing. Well, let me tell you, living in the heart of the Bible Belt, I lost a first-gen director and almost her entire downline right after that because Warren Buffett at that time was donating to Planned Parenthood. And then there was Park Lane Jewelry. Now, those of you who just joined us a couple of years ago have no idea why I'm bringing them up. But, excuse me, for those of us who went through that, how many of you lost people or even lost leaders to that company? I lost a first-gen senior director and most of her team to another direct selling company, and a first-gen senior executive director and most of her downline. And there was a different career plan than we have today. In order to, when the National Executive Director title finally came along, in order to maintain, to achieve that title, you had to, are you ready for this? They weren't called generations then, they were called lines. So you had to have 16 first line directors, one of whom had to be at least an executive director, and to be an executive director, you had to have 8 first line directors.
Bye-bye.
You had to have at least 2 senior directors. Senior director meant 4 first line directors, and you had to have 6 advanced directors. Advanced director meant 2 first line directors, not 1. And you had to maintain that structure, wait for it, for 24 months. Home office, am I lying?
It's just setting people up to fail.
24 months in a row. If you did it 23 months, You went back to the beginning. And that's not all. I had kids who were a baby and a toddler when I started, with a husband who traveled so much for business that I was more of a single mother than not. And remember, there were only cooking shows in those days, so I had to leave the home in order to work. And there were practices, games, concerts, celebrations, birthdays, funerals, illnesses along the way. In other words, there was life. And I've always tried to conduct my business alongside my life rather than starting and stopping and starting and stopping and starting and stopping to do life. I stayed on the roller coaster and I'm still here. One thing I try to remember in times of difficulty, when I don't love what I'm doing, I always try to remember to love why I'm doing it. Number 6, leadership and learning are indispensable to each other. John F. Kennedy. Leadership principle number 4, grow and learn continuously. The best way to start feeling like a leader is to start acting like a leader. And it's a great place to start by learning all you can about leadership. Here are my suggestions for you. Books that I love. Anything and Everything by John Maxwell.
Woohoo!
Principle-Centered Leadership by Stephen Covey. The Platinum Rule by Tony Alessandra. And then, of course, there's networking. But please be selective about who you spend your business time with. This is one of the many reasons that I try to spend as little time as possible on social media. Don't be afraid to trust yourself. If the latest craze going around doesn't feel good to you, it feels inauthentic or gimmicky, don't jump on that bandwagon. And always remember to analyze both your failures and your successes. There is just as much to be learned and remembered from what you did right as what you did wrong. So, why learn to be a better leader and help your people be better leaders? Does it really matter? I can only speak from personal experience here. Helping others to become better is what inspires me now. For those of you still new to the business and new to this level, there will come a time when you have promoted all the way up the ladder. You've earned all the excellence awards, all the incentive trips, all the bonuses. You've even earned Circle of Honor multiple times. And you may wake up and say to yourself, what's left? That's when you can turn the focus from yourself to others. That's when we can look at what we do as so much more than selling spatulas. We can know that what we do matters. That helping someone not just become better at their job, but to become better at life matters. And it's what I believe we were put on this earth to do. And believe me, it's what can keep you going for 32 years. Thank you.